And from the US, let's now shift our focus to the UK. Aiming to quell the public fears after panic buying left fuel pumps completely dry across major cities in the UK, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that the situation has started to improve and was in fact stabilising. The UK Prime Minister assured that the government was making preparations to ensure that supply chains were ready for the run-up to Christmas. Johnson also urged motorists to fill up their cars in the normal way. He added that people must be confident to go about their business.
I want to say, first of all, how much I sympathise with people who've been worried about their journeys, worried about whether they'll be able to use their cars in the normal way to see their loved ones or whatever it is. And I know how frustrating and infuriating it must have been to worry about a shortage of petrol or fuel. We now are starting to see the situation improve. We're hearing from industry that supplies are coming back onto the forecourts in the normal way. And I would just really urge everybody to just go about their business in the normal way and fill up in the normal way when you really need it, and you know, things will start to improve. What we want to do is make sure that we have all the preparations necessary to get through till Christmas and beyond, not just in the supplying the petrol stations, but all parts of our supply chain.
Boris Johnson also ruled out priority access at petrol pumps for key workers. This was the first statement by the UK Prime Minister since the fuel supply problems began. The clarification comes right after Transport Minister Grant Shapps said that Brexit was one of the factors that played a role in the fuel crisis. The opposition leader, Keir Starmer, has lashed out at Boris Johnson and accused him and the government of lurching from one crisis into another. But despite the Prime Minister's assurances, lengthy queues were still seen outside gas stations across London. And according to a Reuters report, some forecourts had also put up signboards warning that there was no fuel available. The post-Brexit dearth of truckers was worsened by a halt to truck driving licences testing during the pandemic. It was sown chaos through supply chain, raising the spectre of widespread shortages, price increases ahead of course, the Christmas season and a prolonged rise in inflation. To tackle the shortage of drivers, the UK government is bringing in measures such as issuing temporary visas to 5,000 foreign drivers. The British Retail Consortium has urged the government to broaden the size and scope of its temporary visa scheme. The Petrol Retailers Association has said that there are early signs that the pressure on petrol stations was beginning to ease.
What we've got is a global economy that is recovering from what has been a once-in-a-century pandemic. And that has caused some particular shortages. I've mentioned a couple, HGV drivers and gas. And those shortages are a function of huge global demand. But we're meeting them. And what we have is all sorts of plans in place to make sure that as we go forward into the new year, that we have everything necessary to protect our supply chains and keep things moving. But as I said, what we're seeing now and what we're hearing now from industry is that the situation on the forecourts in our petrol stations is stabilising.
Britain's business minister has said that soldiers will start driving tankers to replenish empty pumps as fuel shortages continue. Soldiers had been mobilised and would be driving tankers within a few days.
Well, it takes one versed in military defence issues knows that it takes a couple of days, sometimes a few days, to get troops on the ground. We've decided to do that, and I think in the next couple of days people will see some soldiers driving the tanker fleet. I'm not guaranteeing anything. All I'm saying is that I think the situation is stabilising. I think people realise that this will pass, and we're very, very focused on making sure that we get enough drivers. We've stood up military drivers, and we want to just make sure that we get enough petrol into the forecourts that can actually mean that we have enough supply for demand. And it looks like, when we look at the figures yesterday, it looks like the situation is stabilising. The inflow of petrol matches the sales.
For more on this, WION's London Bureau Chief Mandy Clark is now joining us live from London. Mandy, thanks for joining us. Now, we've of course been watching scenes of panic buying and long queues at fuel pumps across the UK. And now Prime Minister Johnson says that the situation has started to improve. How is the situation on ground as of now?
Well, there's no queue behind this petrol station. That's only because it's completely out of fuel. Now, this was one of the first petrol stations that made national news because there was a punch-up here on those early days. So even though they're saying it's stabilizing, there's many fuel stations that are simply out of gas. And that situation is very real for the public. Just going around this area, there's 3 or 4 petrol stations, and it's all the same story. So it's yet to see that normality improve and stabilize as the government is promising. But we are expecting for it to be the case in the next couple of days. Boris Johnson made it clear that he wants things to normalize and people to put gas in the normal way, essentially asking people stop panic buying.
Mandy, just broadening on that, what you just mentioned, there are promises of the supply chain issues being resolved by Christmas. That's around 2 months away. How will this affect the British in the short term?
I think it's kind of short and long term, isn't it? I think we can expect continued kind of shortages of fuel, but also on those grocery shelves. And this is where Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, accused Boris Johnson of really sitting on a crisis because they were warned in the spring that there would be a crisis of HGV drivers because there is a dependence in Britain, of course, of having those drivers from the EU. They left during Brexit. They haven't returned. So there's this very large shortfall. They're the ones that deliver to the grocery stores and to the fuel depots. So there'll be a continued shortage, on the shelves and at the fuel tanks for some time to come.
All right, Mandy Clark, our London Bureau Chief, thanks for joining us on WION at this hour. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.